We had Soros expert Richard Poe on our program to talk about the European debt and the European crisis and what Soros would gain if the euro collapses. And I asked Richard to come down to our studio here in Dallas so he could lay out something that he had said that he thought was in store for America before the election, based on what Soros has done in the past to countries all around the world. I want you to know this is the name of the book. It's Shadow Party. This was 2006?
Yes.
The research was done in about 2004. So this isn't about the president. This isn't about any of this. This research was done in 2004.
Some of it.
Some of it. Well, 2004, 5, but definitely before 6. Nobody had any idea that Obama would be the president at that time. Probably no. Spooky Dude did, but nobody had any. So it's not about the president. But it is about this election to you, this coming election, right? That it is about a fundamental transformation and finishing of the job, do you think, honestly, by this next election?
Well, I think they certainly will try to finish the job by this next election. Whether they succeed or not is another question. What we saw when we wrote this book is the plan that George Soros and his network had for America. They were very clear about this plan already in 2004. They were saying it clearly. And so when they finally succeed in accomplishing what they set out to accomplish, that's another question. We don't know that. We can't see the future. But the plan that they laid out was very clear already in 2004, and they had already done it in many other countries. And
they have actually, where have they actually said this plan about America? Have they actually said this plan that you're going to lay out in so many words, or just in their actions?
Well, in 2004, George Soros began giving a lot of interviews to the press. That's when he came out against George Bush. And at that time, he said clearly that what I have done in various other countries now has to be done here in the United States. And he was clearly saying that he was going to enact the plan that is described in that book.
Because when he decides that a regime is oppressive, he goes in to collapse it. And most people don't have a problem with it because it has happened before with communist countries.
Yes.
But now he is on record saying, this is what's going to happen. I'll do it the way I did before. So why don't you lay it out and show me what's coming? Because you contend the way he always does it before is right before a huge election.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, these are the 5 steps. We call them 5 steps for overthrowing a government. This is what Soros has specialized in doing for decades in various countries around the world. And
when you say form a shadow government, what does that mean?
A shadow government is a government in the wings. He infiltrates a country with his own operatives, putting them in all levels of life, in politics, in medicine, in academia, in journalism, and also in the very critical areas of the armed forces and intelligence services and police services. That's a very important part of the process for obvious reasons.
That's the only part of the process I haven't been able to find, except through the unions. But I haven't been able to find his influence in the government. Have you? I mean, in the military. Have you?
No, I can't say specifically in the United States that I have seen the evidence of it.
Yeah, okay, you've seen the evidence of it?
I'm saying I have not found it.
Okay, okay. But he has done it in other countries, we know that.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So the next one is control the airwaves.
Yes, and when Soros and his team target a country for one of these regime changes, they always start some kind of media operation, typically a radio station or sometimes a TV station, which is under Soros's ownership or direct control in one way or another.
Did he do that with Pacifica? Is Pacifica his? Here in
I don't know. I haven't kept track of that.
Yeah, I think Tiffany, find out if Pacifica is under his direct control, but I know that he is also funding journalists here in America
Yes.
at the national and local level.
Yes, he's acquired in America a very high profile in all kinds of media operations at all levels in the United States.
Okay.
But often when he goes to the less developed countries, all he needs is a little radio station, and that enables him to reach everyone in the country, and that's what he needs. And step 3 is to destabilize the state, which can be done by causing an economic crisis or perhaps taking advantage of an existing crisis that just happens along.
I contend he's done both of those here. He's, through his Apollo Alliance, which he was involved with, he helped make the economic crisis that we're in by just spending, I mean, what is, it'll be $5 trillion by the time, in the next, this 4 years, $5 trillion. And he has also taken advantage of the existing crisis that we had with the housing market.
Correct,
right?
yes.
Okay.
Step 4 is to provoke an election crisis. What this means is that he waits for an election, and then when the election takes place, he declares that the election is fraudulent, that the opposite side, his opponents are stealing the election. He uses his controlled radio or TV stations to blast this message around the country. He uses his shadow government and shadow, well, I guess it's part of the shadow government, but he has street activists who go out in the street and create a big ruckus, saying the election's being stolen.
He already has this, and what gave him the idea was it's the the Save Our State, and it's the state attorney generals, and he has gone in and funded SOS and all the people who verify elections. He's tried to get his people in there, and he's formed this whole thing, and he got the idea in the 2000 election. So there's your shadow government on an election crisis. You have the people out in the streets to cause chaos, but it's people also like MoveOn.org, et cetera, that cry out fraud. So the election crisis, we know they have the ability to do that.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And once you provoke the election crisis, then you go to stage 5, is that you stage massive demonstrations. You put all these activists out in the street crying voter fraud, and they demand to change the election result. Now, in Yugoslavia in 2000, for example, he had a group called Otpor, which had somewhere around 70,000 activists. He put those people out in the street saying that the election was being stolen. Now, in this case, he actually had armed units. This Otpor had units blocking roads around Belgrade who were armed with AK-47s, mortars, anti-tank, shoulder-launched rockets, and so forth and so on. The protesters in the streets were armed with all kinds of Molotov cocktails and weapons of that, homemade weapons of that sort. They burned down the Parliament building. I think a couple people were killed in that incident. So these are often called bloodless coups, these things that Soros does. But in the case of Yugoslavia and some others, they were not bloodless at all, nor were they in any way nonviolent. And so what they did is they had the whole capital surrounded by these armed units. They had these violent protesters storming through the streets, burning down buildings, and so forth, and creating a huge ruckus. And what was their issue? The issue was that Milosevic, the sitting president, was running against a man named Kostanovic. Kostanovic came in with something like, I think it was 48, 49%. Milosevic was actually losing. Both sides appeared to have been engaged in fraud. Now, so far, everything was according to the Yugoslav constitution. Nobody was breaking any laws or violating the constitution. The Yugoslav constitution at that time said that when you have, if you don't have a candidate with a 50% plurality, then you have a second election, a runoff election. Instead of allowing the constitution to play out, they put these protesters in the street and they canceled the runoff election. They said, forget the election. We want Kostanovic, we want Milosevic out. Forget the election, forget the Constitution, forget the constitutional process. Kostanovic will be our man, and they simply pressed in this violent manner until they got what they wanted. There was no second election. The Constitution was broken and discarded. Milosevic was arrested and sent off as a war criminal to Holland, where he later allegedly hanged himself in his cell.
Wow, well, that's a happy ending here. All of these things, except for step one, I think, are complete because of the military. But many in the police were duped by the massive demonstrations. I mean, the massive demonstrations. We know who those demonstrators are, right? They're the Occupy Wall Street people.
Yes.
And they have been bought and paid for, much to most of them not even paying attention and knowing it. Bought and paid for in many ways by George Soros and his friends, and it's his friends and family network.
Correct.
Correct. What makes you think that this is going to happen now? That this is the time for this? I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm asking you this in hopes that you're wrong. I'm hoping for more time, but I don't know if you're wrong. What makes you think this is it?
Well, I hope I'm wrong too.
Right.
But the fact that what you were just talking about earlier, the fact that we have all these world leaders, quote unquote, in Davos now saying that we have a perfect storm. The fact that Soros himself in the last few days has been making very alarming public statements, saying things to the effect that the euro is going to collapse and the whole European Union, the European experiment is going to go off a cliff. He's been saying, for example, that he said then when this financial contagion spreads to the United States, Soros saying this again, that there will be riots in the streets in America and possibly a repressive police state crackdown in the United States, and making predictions of an extremely alarming nature to the media. And this type of statement can only serve one purpose, which is to create fear, alarm, and some kind of reaction. You know, it's a panic or perhaps some other kind of reaction, getting people very angry and ready to fight.